So we'll just give it a little bit before everybody starts joining in. We've got a few attendees already, and we'll just wait, give it maybe another minute. Yes, I think the attendees are joining in, and maybe in another few minutes, and I will just get started, everybody. Thank you for joining. Yeah, I guess we could just get started. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on customer onboarding. My name is Sharad, and I'm the marketing director here at Veriday. I'm really excited about the session today, and we have some great speakers who can help us learn how organizations can leverage technology to improve their customer onboarding. We will speak about some of the challenges firms face in their customer lifecycle process and how is technology helping alleviate those challenges. There will also be a brief demonstration. A little bit of housekeeping first. Now, today's session is going to be recorded, and everyone who's registered will receive an email with a link to the on-demand version of this webinar and a copy of today's presentation slides. So we will run for about 35 minutes, with questions can be handled at the very end. Now, if you have any questions during the webinar, you can please send them to us through the questions panel. And in case those questions are not answered during the webinar, we will definitely try and get back to you after the session. Now, before we dive in, I will take a moment to introduce Veriday, which is a professional services and managed services organization for various digital transformation initiatives that enterprises around the world trust over the past 2 decades. Now, Veriday specializes in creating low-code applications and solutions that help its customers deliver an exceptional customer experience through its partnerships with top-of-the-line technology providers. Now, that brings me to my next slide with a brief introduction of our technology partner, Appian. And some of you may already know about Appian, but for the benefit of everyone else, Appian is a low-code automation platform that enables organizations to build applications quickly for process automation, data unification across systems, and for providing customers a complete and exceptional user experience. Now, let's turn our attention to the real stars of today's show. We have a powerhouse of expertise from Appian. We have John Trapani, Christian Leonard, and Jack Maroney. From Veriday, we have Sam Hyland. Could you all please take a moment to introduce yourself?
Sure, happy to, thanks. Hi, everyone, thank you for joining us. I'm John from Appian. I'm what we call an industry leader focusing on financial services. I have a background of several decades in and around financial services, software engineering, and operations. Looking forward to today's discussion.
Awesome, thanks, John. This is Jack Maroney. Pleasure to meet all of you here today. Thanks for taking the time. I cover our financial services firms here in the Northeast for Appian. I have about a decade in the low-code automation space as well. So very excited to touch on topics which come up every day with my customers, and hopefully we can shed some knowledge on this. So I'll pass to Christian here.
Thanks, Jack. Hey, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. I'm Christian Leonard. I'm a senior solutions consultant with Appian. I have about 5 years, coming on 5 years of experience working with Appian as a technology, delivering software applications to our clients to help automate their workflows.
All right, and I'm Sam Hyland with Veriday, VP Professional Services. So I manage the services team here. I've been building applications in the financial services, insurance, and other industries for the past 20 years. Back to you, Sharad.
Thank you all for your introduction. I would like to now get our conversation started on this very important subject of customer onboarding. So I think the first question will be for you, and I'd like to understand, what does a typical customer life cycle really look like, and what does it entail, John?
Sure. So, at a high level, I think there are 4 major components that we like to think about when we talk about the CLM process. Onboarding, certainly, this is you've agreed to bring on a new customer, entity, or counterparty, all of the work that goes into bringing that customer on board, getting all the sign-offs, all the credit reviews, all the risk reviews accomplished, that's typically what we call the onboarding. That also includes a component, naturally, of KYC and customer due diligence. Although I'll point out that KYC and due diligence is sort of an ongoing throughout the life cycle of your relationship. You'll be performing these functions periodically. Servicing, another component. Hopefully customers who do business with you continue to evolve and consume more of your products and services, and they'll have changes and tweaks to their account. And being able to service them, efficiently and effectively is an important part of keeping them happy. And then something else which is a little newer from our perspective, but very important, is provisioning. So if you imagine that you're bringing a complex customer on who's signing up for some complex products and services that you're offering, oftentimes the last step in an onboarding or bringing on a new account is some tickets are created, and a provisioning or operations team is actually going and setting up all the accounts and configuring all the products that they're buying from you. With Appian and our ability to automate it, you can actually automate a lot of that provisioning so that it happens faster and there are fewer mistakes. So all the choices and the selections that a new customer may make during their onboarding process can be automatically reflected in the products and services they're buying from you. Jack, do you have any color you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, as you described, it's a hefty process. There are a lot of sub-processes within this. It's data-intensive knowledge work. It involves humans. It involves document intake. And so it's not just, signing up for a Substack, right? It's passing on documents that hold critical information about your clients. It's getting them set up in different systems, getting them the right technology access, making sure that your data setup is correct as well. So it can be highly intensive work for someone to manually take what's in a PDF document and put them in their systems of record. But it's critical that you do so in an automated way for an efficiency perspective. And then John mentioned it as well. You're trying to de-risk some of the processes down the line as well. There are ongoing processes, KYC, AML, there's credit review, risk review, things like that. And it's critical that the data is in the right systems. So not only with automation platforms like Appian, the best way to do it is really to automate the intake of that data so that you eliminate errors, and then you're setting it up correctly within the right data flows with the right review processes, and then connected to the right systems.
Got it. There are indeed a lot of intricacies involved in this lifecycle process. Now, when organizations embark on these process improvement journeys, what are some of the goals and objectives that they seek to achieve?
I'll start, guys. It can be argued that there are only ever three main drivers of any investment: growing revenue, and there are obviously that's a bit of a fractal. There's a lot of things you can do to help drive revenue growth: efficiency or cost takeout, and then risk mitigation. Good projects, and CLM typically are good projects from the standpoint of all three of those factors. A better and faster onboarding process can help grow revenue by, number one, shrinking the time to revenue. Rather than taking months to bring a customer on board and activate their products, you could turn that into days or weeks. It can also, by providing a better customer experience, help make your relationship with your customers a little more sticky and a little more satisfying. And in certain lines of business, I'm thinking like wealth management or private wealth, that can be exceptionally important. Efficiency. Well-designed processes mean your people, which is typically your most expensive resource, are able to use their skills on high-value tasks and less on the day-to-day document management, document shuffling kind of work. And then risk mitigation. So a lot goes into this, but it's everything from making sure that credit decisions are being made with all the right data, all the sign-offs required to know that you can onboard this customer and do business properly. Those are all happening. Those are all very well documented. Those are all demonstrable to your auditors and regulators. I don't know, Jack, if you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you touched on most of it. I would say that getting your customers on board quickly is the highest importance. I would say that the time value to money, the customer experience, all of that is it's important to make sure that you have a process that heightens that. You're losing out on money every day that you don't get someone on board. Also, you mentioned, John, that some of the most expensive resources are human resources. So reducing the amount of person hours or reallocating it, more likely, making sure that knowledge work can be executed versus pedantic tasks in the interim, and then making sure that your downstream tasks and sub processes that we didn't even mention, the reporting, the auditing, compliance, etc., tax preparation, treasury, all these things are downstream of your first interaction with your customers. And so making sure that you have a good way to get your customers on board makes every one of those things easier as well. Sam, I don't know if there's anything you'd add.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to draw an underline under customer experience, right? I mean, this is the first real interaction you have with your customer. I was speaking to an executive at one of the smaller banks in Canada, and he was really stressing, reducing the time to onboard, which, we've talked about from the cost perspective, from the internal processes side, but from the customer view, they don't want to sit there waiting, right? From the time they make the decision to do something with you, whether they're internal, external, whatever the relationship with you, they want to be in as soon as possible with all the access, with all the tools that they need. And then the actual experience for the customer as they go through that. So, one of the most irritating things I've heard is, when you ask the customer the same questions more than once, right? So making sure you've got a streamlined, efficient process gets them through. By the end of the day, they're on board.
Got it. I think that's a great point, being customer centric. I think that is really, really good point. Now, do you see as common areas of focus across banking, do you see these as common areas of focus across banking, insurance, financial services? Or do you think there are industry-specific nuances that are different for each of these? John?
I mean, so to answer the first part of the question, this is an unusually common set of problems that our customers bring to us, and we have solved it for them dozens and dozens and dozens of times. I think to some degree, there is a lot of room in the industry to do onboarding more effectively, to help de-risk it and to help make it more efficient. And we continue to hear this from customers and prospects. I will say to the second part of your question, there are certainly nuances. It's different to do a retail onboarding than it would be to onboard a complex counterparty, or if I'm a custodian, to onboard a new custodial customer. There are certainly differences in process, differences in the paperwork, differences in the kinds of internal stakeholders who need to play a role in those decisions. And the good thing about having a flexible approach to solving it is that it's easy to accommodate all the nuance, even from bank A to bank B, asset manager A to asset manager B. High level, they're going to be doing similar things, but each company, each firm will have a different way of tackling it. And it's important to have tools that you can actually wrap around the way your business works.
Got it. And Jack, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from a commonality perspective, I feel like this comes up in probably 60 to 70% of the conversations I've been having. I would say last week alone, I probably had 4 customer calls that were around, they brought up, unbeknownst to us, that they had issues with onboarding when we were talking about other things as well. It really is the root and stem of a lot of different processes and sub-processes. For nuance sake, I would say from a low code perspective, I think that gives folks a lot of flexibility to address certain things within banking. Like John said, every financial service institution, whether you be an asset manager or a bank, all of the process is unique to them. And I don't think that's unique to financial services. But what I'm saying is the ability to model your process in your digital technology process is really important. And then I would also say something that's unique to financial services is it's a highly regulated industry. So when you need to make adjustments and invoke policies and procedures and make that part of your process, there's no better way to do it than through some sort of low-code process modeler. It just becomes that much more flexible. It's less expensive. It's faster, so you can induce those changes without missing timelines and things like that. So I would say that's one of the big nuances within this space that I hear from my customers.
Got it. Compliance remaining key. Understood. So that's a great point too. Now, we've talked a little bit about this, but I think I'd want to now turn our attention from objectives to challenges. What are the key challenges that organizations commonly encounter? So, John, would you like to take that?
Sure. Problem one is typically that onboarding just takes too long. It can take months, especially for very complex new relationships, for very complex organizations where there's a lot of due diligence required. Taking months to activate your customers is not a great story for you and not a great outcome for them. And a consequence of that is the customer experience is not great. Somebody mentioned earlier about it's frustrating to ask your customers for the same information more than once. That experience, their relationship with you, particularly if they're a net new customer, you want that to be a great experience. You want to be, well-oiled. You want to give them transparency into how is their onboarding going? When can they expect to be activated? These are all things that customers come to us to help solve. And there are other challenges. Jack, I'm sure you have others you could talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. To piggyback off the customer experience, asking things twice, et cetera, folks, when they engage on a digital level with any brand, now have heightened expectations. We're probably 15 years into this almost fully digital world where people are interacting with e-commerce customers or companies. And that's kind of your competition from a CX perspective, is that interacting with you should be kind of, even though you're interacting in a complex way, but interacting with a customer, that really should be the standard. I would say some of the other issues, poor communication internally, no audit trail. If a customer asks a question, do you have a record of it? If you're dealing with things from an email and Excel level, your information is completely siloed into different places. Or if you're using different systems without a centralized view of that can be extremely cumbersome, both internally and then for your customers as well. And then you mentioned it a couple of times, but the inaccuracies in setting up a customer can lead to tremendous downstream issues as well, and whether that be from a compliance standpoint, from a servicing standpoint, et cetera. So those are just a few of the challenges I've been hearing.
That makes sense. And Sam, would you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll just add to that too. I mean, I think most organizations have a good grasp on their happy path, right? We know how to onboard a customer when they get through all the risk assessments, they've provided all the information, everything goes smoothly. But you got to think beyond the happy path and think about the customer experience when you go off the happy path. What happens if that risk assessment raises a flag? It needs to go through a manual review process. The guy who normally does the manual review process is on vacation for 2 weeks. How do you make sure that gets routed to the appropriate person to follow up in a timely manner without the customer even being aware that you've gone outside of your normal flow? And I think that's something that, as you design these processes, as you work with tools like Appian, they can certainly help with that, and it's something you've got to keep top of mind.
Yeah, you mentioned some key challenges, poor communication, information silos. I think, can you talk some more about ways in which organizations are addressing some of these challenges? John?
Sure. I think we might be pulling up a few screens to sort of narrate behind as we're talking, to illustrate behind as we're talking. But one key way is process orchestration. So we've mentioned throughout the course of this discussion a number of different functions that play a role during this life cycle. Having an application that sits around them and can help coordinate them adds transparency, meets SLAs, which Sam just mentioned a good, not even an edge case where somebody who needs to solve a problem is just not available to solve it. How do you make sure you're escalating properly so that your internal and external SLAs are being met? Having an orchestration layer will give you the transparency, give you the efficiency, and make sure that you're sort of mitigating the risk of, we've onboarded a customer, but we didn't actually get approval from finance because nobody knows where the signature is. Or, we've onboarded this loan and it's for a different amount because the underwriters didn't actually sign off correctly on what it was you were trying to agree on. And what I think we're seeing here are some pages from an Appian onboarding experience, which give you some idea of how it's consolidating tasks and bringing them to the fore. Jack, Sam, I don't know if you have other things you'd like to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're seeing here are a couple things. One is transparency. You can see pretty much every task that has happened. It's audited. If you get questions about it, both internally and externally, it's a way to show that. From a regulatory perspective, auditability is super important as well. I would say, from an efficiency standpoint, all of the business rules that you might need to actually effectuate and execute tasks are in here as well. And then there's centralization, right? So we talked about having a central point of communication, but also a central place for data. So you're seeing data from probably a lot of different systems that you might have, your KYC systems, maybe some of your other onboarding systems that you have, maybe your finance systems. But where do those are separate entities. How do you view it in one place? And then from a transparency perspective, you're also getting a view here on some of the trends and performance of your business. So how long is it taking to complete certain tasks? I think we're going to talk a little bit about how we set goals within this process as well. Well, this is a great place to start. Is you can't really set goals if they're not measurable, and you can't really improve upon anything that you can't see from a measurement perspective as well. So you're really kind of blindly going after any kind of type of improvement if you don't have the ability to measure this as well. So I just think those are three major parts: the transparency, auditability, centralization of data and communication, and then the transparency from a performance perspective is really important as well.
Got it. Yeah, I think bringing the right data to the right people from however many systems are lying underneath is fantastic, actually. Now, another thing that we've been hearing a lot of recently is a lot of interest around AI and automation, and how is that helping, if it is helping at all, Joe?
I'm actually going to let Jack take this one because I think he has some good in the wild discussions to have.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one way, I'll give an example. For instance, Appian has AI document classification. And so what we're seeing here on the screen is a commercial banking application. I mentioned previously how critical it is to get data out of these types of documents and into systems of record. And you might have a human do this today, but in the future, and Appian is the future, you have the ability to take the data from these documents right now, train them on the documents that you're typically getting, and then extricate the information automatically. So I know in the past, for instance, when I've signed up for a mortgage, I've had to kind of copy and paste stuff for someone else to put in another system. I don't want to do that, and neither does the person on the other side of it. So if you can kind of automate and extricate and make sure that you set this up and train the model to take the correct information and put it in the right fields in your system, it's going to save a ton of time because the system is doing it, the computer is doing it for you. And so that's one of the one of the ways that we have a lot of customers doing this. Or a couple other AI skills, email classification. You get an inbound email, where does it go? Well, based on the sentiment, we're pushing it into the right triage and having the right person start the onboarding process if in fact that's the subject of the email. So just one way. And you can kind of see here, and I'll let Christian describe a little bit more about this, but what a process actually looks like. This isn't just a whiteboard. It's not just a Visio board. This is actually how you develop in a process modeler. So this is Appian's process modeler, where you can see how we can pretty easily translate and replicate your business processes within a digital whiteboard, essentially. But this is actually the development. So all the screens that you saw previously, the dashboards, the document intake, these are built and configured and then basically linked together in a process modeler. Christian, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add to this.
Yeah, I think what's unique to this is that for any digital transformation journey, be it onboarding or anything else, there's going to be a level of process mapping that goes into the standardization of these processes. And then that process mapping is traditionally translated downstream to the development of an application. And in Appian, you're able to do both at once. So you're able to drag and drop components from the left side of our screen here onto our palette, actually design how our process is going to look. But what's cool about this is these are actually nodes that have code behind the scenes. That's why we say low code application development, which allows us to designate how our process is actually functioning. And then we can actually go behind the scenes to look at the running process instances. So this is actually the process for which we're running our applications, not just the design for which we envision our applications to run.
And one thing I would add is this is iterative, right? So when you see potential for process improvements and you see potential for automation, it's easy to bring kind of those events, nodes, workflow items, smart services, and automation into this kind of palette here. So as you can see, there's AI skill for extraction, reconciliation. Well, that's something that we can pull over onto the screen. If you saw, hey, this task is taking far too long because a person is doing the review. Is there a way that we could train a model or have RPA or have an integration to another system to speed up this process? And that's creating that value of reduction of human work and maybe reallocating that to more knowledge work.
And your point around version history, we're able to capture an audit log of that version history. So as the product process changes over time, if you want to have a look back at what that process used to look like, you can jump to those versions and actually open up a previous version of that process. You can see who as a developer, who changed that process. So once again, complete auditability around the back end of designing applications, but also the front end of your onboarding history as well, to be able to capture that meta level changes or that metadata level changes to who took action on what, when they took action, what the status was, what the field level changes were, et cetera.
Yeah. And when you're making of changes is necessarily less cost intensive than traditional development as well. You can kind of see there's a lot of pre-built components that we have here, but your process is going to be unique and it's going to be different. And so what you want to do is make those custom changes, but you don't want the custom changes to be so intense that you are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on every minor change. What you can do here is essentially drag and drop with pre-built components so that you're significantly reducing costs and you're improving the time to actually get those configurations and customizations made.
Right, yeah. So if we wanted to expose an interface, we would, let's say an interface to capture a bit of data, we'd be able to input our user interface task in here, drag that onto our line, and then let's say, theoretically speaking, after that, we wanted to write that data to our database somewhere. Well, we could go ahead and write our records, drag our records node in, and then we can right click into it and actually designate what screens we're pulling up behind the scenes here and what records we're writing to the database. So it's as easy as that. It's, I would say, minutes, definitely less than hours, as opposed to tens of hours or even days to configure some of these very simple things.
Yeah, I think even the ability to visualize the whole process in this way is fantastic, and just the way you can simulate the changes that you can make and how it will impact the whole process, I think that's a fantastic thing. Thank you for that incredible overview. Really, thanks for that. Now, all of these considerations make it seem like this could be a really, really complicated undertaking. So, Sam, this question is for you. How do you recommend firms get started?
I think it's the same way you start any other project, right? You start with a needs assessment. You start figuring out, where am I today? Take a step back, look at your onboarding process from start to end. Maybe there's some pieces you've automated already. Maybe you've got RPA in place for a section of that flow, and you've automated that. Maybe you've got another section where it's emails, people communicating. It's a good candidate for automation. Once you've got that grasp of the overall flow, you've got to engage with all the stakeholders. We might go through some UI, UX sessions or user experience design sessions to really understand how everyone is interacting with the onboarding process. And that's not just, drawing screens and wireframes. That's really getting down and doing some research as to what's working, what's not working, what are the pain points, understanding everything. And it's important that you engage your external stakeholders and your internal stakeholders, and you're aware of any legal, compliance, regulatory concerns that are part of that as well too. Once you've got that overall grasp, I'd say you're starting to map out the process. You're starting to put together something visual. It's probably going to look a little bit like that Appian Designer, but it might just be people on a whiteboard sketching to start. From there, as you start to get, and this could be a several week process. It's not a day, but once you've got an idea of where you want to go, then you start thinking about implementation. And when it comes to implementation, you're just like any other project, we recommend an agile approach to that. So working in discrete iterations over time, at the end of each iteration, delivering something that works. So in a traditional software development project, you might get some web developers together. They might spend 2 weeks building a form for you. In Appian, Christian was just showing us some diagrams. You can move a lot faster. So what you're accomplishing in those iterations is a lot more, but it's the same fundamental principle, just iteratively delivering value, continuously delivering value to your customers. And as you go through that process, you'll learn more about your process. You'll learn more about how your onboarding flow works, and you might identify other opportunities to improve over time.
Got it. That brings me to my next question, really. How should firms really think about goal setting when they embark on a customer transformation initiative?
So, my basic advice is it's important to understand what your baseline is and what your must-achieve goals are. So, before you, and this is not just for CLM, this is for anywhere you look to spend money to improve your software estate. Figure out what your must-achieve goals are. For something like CLM, it could be time to onboard. It could be efficiency goals and labor. It could be a reduction in the number of errors that your teams are making. But it's important up front to identify what those must-achieve goals are, so that as you are building and delivering value, hopefully iteratively, as Sam described, you're able to actually measure your post-release improvements in these measures, so that at some point, hopefully not too long down the road, you're able to say, I have met my most important goals, they're measurable, and here are the results. Now, I advise pairing those with aspirational goals. So, if you say you want to take your onboarding process from 4 months down to 2, great. But why not set a stretch goal to see if you can get it down to 3 weeks? You may not get there for a bit. It may not be in your first set of releases, but having those aspirational goals is a good way to help frame what the software lifecycle journey is. So after you've met those important first goals, you can continue to drive towards something more aspirational, which will deliver you even more value.
Yeah, I think there's another element to this which is critical, which is measurement. I think that we showed some dashboards, and even within the Appian platform, we have what's called Process HQ, which allows you to measure how you're performing within those processes. But initially, you want to be measuring your process itself. That's part of the goal setting process. Obviously, can't improve what you can't measure. But if you don't really have those baselines to start, try to do as best you can, but also put the onus on your vendors and put the onus on your consultants as well. That's us. I'm creating work for myself, but unfortunately, it's asking, how are your current customers doing this? How are they performing? What were their goals? How did they achieve them? You really have to go to the folks who have the industry expertise and that knowledge, both from a technology and business perspective, so that you get a sense of what is actually possible. Are the things that we came up with relatively possible? Have you delivered those before? And come up with a plan to say, okay, we want to digitally transform this onboarding process. How do we do it? And what should the outcomes actually be? So I think it's, you're not in this alone. There are other people who have this industry expertise and knowledge. I don't know, Sam, if there's anything you wanted to add to that, but
yeah, I think you both captured things pretty well. I mean, you need to have your process goals that you're going to measure as you go through over time. You need to have your aspirational goals, your stretch goals that represent a signpost in the distance that you're moving towards. I think your point, Jack, about engaging with your vendors to understand what others are doing is really important, because it might make you aware of things you didn't even know were possible. And the other piece I'll just add to that is, I mentioned, doing some user sessions, some user research as part of your upfront planning and engaging with your stakeholders. That really should drive a lot of your goals. So understanding what those users' pain points are as they go through this process, that drives a lot of the goals that you're going to move towards.
Got it. Thank you, Sam. And I think I will now go around the table to ask them my next question, starting with you, John. What is the one piece of advice you would have for customers looking to improve their life cycle?
So again, this will be true for every effort. Get executive sponsorship. Not only does that make the entire budgeting and execution process easier, but you're very likely to have great results when you embark and solve these kinds of problems. And why not have an executive sponsor understand that you're the person who made it happen? So that would be my 2 cents.
Yeah, I would say for me, it's get connected with folks who have done it before or have engaged in the process, at least of attempting to improve their onboarding and CLM processes. And that means they're attending some of these user events, whether they be technology or industry events. I think there's a lot of information to be gleaned. Everyone has their own personal network, but going outside, and then again, ask your vendor who else has done this in your network. Just try to do kind of a level expansion of the network and try to find and glean information from folks who have actually taken this path. It's a well-trod path, and I think there's interesting innovations coming around all the time. So the only way that you're going to be learning about those is talking to vendors, talking to other customers of theirs, and then engaging in kind of industry expertise events too.
All right, and I know I've said this a few times in different ways, but I'm going to stress it again. In engaging with all of your stakeholders, because as you embark on this, it is a change, and we haven't really talked about change management, but getting buy-in for the changing your process, for automating your process, is really key to success here. So having engaged with your stakeholders, receiving the feedback from the stakeholders know the change is coming, and delivering something that helps the stakeholders do their job, that gets rid of their pain points, that frees them up for higher value tasks, is really key to overall success here as well.
That makes sense. Thank you, everybody. Thanks a lot. I think I'm just looking at some of the questions that have been trickling in. So I think attendees have sent some questions over to us, and I would like to move on to that section now so that we have enough time to get through some of them. So I'm looking at the first one here that has come in, which says, so they're asking, how long does a typical implementation cycle take? Would like to take that one.
Sam, I feel like you're the implementer.
Yeah, so I can take that. I mean, it's always a tricky question because there's always an "it depends" that goes alongside this. But an implementation with Appian could be as short as 8 weeks, 8 to 12 weeks to deliver some initial value to your stakeholders, and it can grow from there depending on what you're trying to do. But you can move quite quickly.
Got it. Thank you. I think another question just came in. It says, how do you approach compliance and security requirements? I think this is yeah.
I'll start, and maybe Sam can add some color too. So there's 2 ways to think about this. One is sort of platform level. Is Appian a secure and compliant platform? Has it been validated to live within my organization safely? And the answer typically is, yes, absolutely. Like you'd expect, we maintain a laundry list of all of the 3-letter acronyms and 4-letter certifications that every good software vendor has to have, including things like FedRAMP and the ISO alphabet soup, and then security requirements. So, we take security seriously. I mean, an awful lot of our customers are either financial services or federal government. So it's hard for us to play it fast and loose when it comes to security. So there's that sort of platform-oriented perspective where Appian is both very good at it and also takes it very seriously. And we've demonstrated that time and again to our customers. But then there's the application level, environment level sort of security and compliance that maybe Sam could talk about a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you start with a platform like Appian that puts you in a good position and has all those 3-letter acronyms behind it, you're in a good position to start. But before you get there, you've really got to understand what are my security and compliance requirements, and what are some potential future security and compliance environment requirements. So we found that this can be a bit of a moving landscape, and you're looking to expand. Perhaps if you're in the US, you might be looking to expand to new states. If you're global, you might be looking at some point to expand to Europe. You've got GDPR requirements there. So you've got to consider all of these aspects and how they come in. Once you understand the requirements, you've got to there's this term, shift security left, right? So you move it earlier on in the process. So you make sure that everyone working on the solution is aware of these compliance and these security requirements, that you're building this with this in mind, that if there's testing and validation that happens, that's happening as you go. So I was talking about an iterative delivery. Each one of those iterations should consider security and compliance. It's not something you want to bolt on at the end, because that's when you go through an audit or something like that, and you run into challenges. You got to go back and fix things. So just like technology issues like bugs, the sooner you identify the needs, the sooner you address the needs, the cheaper it is. So that would be my other key piece of advice here, is that shifting security, shifting compliance to the left, addressing it earlier on in the life cycle.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, another one. A couple of them have actually come in. And it's talking about integration in particular. It says you talked about integration. If there are homegrown internal legacy systems in play, can you still integrate them?
Yeah, I could take that one as a technology guy. I want to start with Appian's approach to integration. First, I think it's important to understand a big differentiator for us is our ability to integrate in a low-code, no-code manner with a number of third-party tools. We have out-of-the-box connectors, and for anything that we don't have an out-of-the-box connector, if there's a REST API, SOAP, SMTP, JMS, JDBC connector, we'd be able to connect to it like nobody's business, much faster than building it through a high-code approach. Now, I guess to the question's point is if there's something that is more of a legacy system, and in this scenario, I'm going to assume that it's exposed, or it's maybe not exposed to the outside world via an API. Obviously, these legacy systems could still have APIs if they're built homegrown. But let's say if there's not an API, what you could use in Appian is a tool that I like to say is in our tool belt called robotic process automation, where you can allow a bot to effectively log into that technology or that system and screen scrape the data off of that system to make it usable in Appian. And so there's no need, the beauty of this is there's no need to replicate the data. In Appian, you can screen scrape it, change it if you need to, and you can have that bot go in, log back into that legacy system, and update the data where it lies. So back to the ease of integration, that's one thing. And then the ability to leave your data where it lies is, I would say, another differentiator for us. If you've ever been a part of a data migration, it is not necessarily a fun thing to be a part of. So we do not create necessarily multiple sources of data, multiple sources of truth. Leave the data where it lies and integrate it in a bidirectional manner in Appian.
Got it. Thank you. That was pretty comprehensive, Christian.
And I'll just jump in there too, because I think it's a good point for me to mention something that's come up in a few of my discussions around low-code platforms. And people look at, I've had discussions with me around low-code, and they've said, but I've got all this special sauce inside my business where we need to write all these special components. We need to do all this special stuff that's unique to my business, and that's okay. Right? I mean, as Christian just said, you leave your data where it is. Your data still sits in the same systems. You might have, systems that you integrate with that have all this special sauce, right? We're not trying to build a core banking platform in Appian. What we're trying to do with Appian is, connect it to your core banking platform, connect it to all your data sources. One of the things I loved about the demo that they showed is, you have data coming from different systems. You've got a view of your entire process. And as a platform, Appian's really good at building out that process, at connecting to all those different systems and doing all of that integration work for you and getting it done quickly, which is one of the reasons I really, really like it.
Oftentimes, an onboarding owner, for example, they don't necessarily care where the data is coming from. It's a huge automation for them to not have to log into 4 or 5 different systems to get a complete view of their onboarding. If you can surface that data all on one screen, be it coming from those 5 different systems, it makes their lives a lot easier rather than having to swivel between those different systems.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. I think we've got time for maybe one more question. And I think this one says, is this an off-the-shelf solution?
Yes. So as I mentioned previously, you saw a lot of the stuff that we have already pre-built. There's a lot of functionality that governs onboarding that does come out. I would say it's we call it a solution. You can think of it as a solution or accelerator. There's unique pieces to your business, of course, but because we're able to iterate and make custom changes pretty rapidly. You can go in there and make the changes. So it's really kind of the best of both worlds of something that's off the shelf already and then highly configurable for your needs to connect to your systems, to work with your workflows as well, but offers a ton of the functionality that you're going to need right off the bat as well. So yeah, we mentioned it's a common problem for a lot of people to address this area. We've provided a common solution to that extent.
Got it. Thank you. But I think that's all that we have time for today. And we're at the end of today's session. I'd like to thank everyone for their participation. And in case you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Sam from Veriday and Jack from Appian. You have their contact information on your screens now. And you can also scan the QR code. You will be taken to a landing page, a form will pop up. Just fill that out and, we'd be happy to offer a consultation for you. So once again, thank you, everybody. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you, John, Jack, Christian, and Sam. It was a fantastic session. I hope everybody who joined enjoyed the session. I hope everybody has a great day and rest of the week. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.